Kia ora, good evening. A wind farm near Bluff could still be on the cards. Now an agreement's been reached between Tiwai Aluminium Smelter and Meridian Energy. Energy 3 was granted consent to build a wind farm at Green Hills between Bluff and Invercargill last March, but this stalled after an Environment Court appeal, and later the company delayed due to uncertainty about Tiwai Smelter's viability and future. Today, Energy 3 Director Tom Cameron said the company was continuing to proceed with financing and procurement, but was unable to give a definite time frame. Mr Cameron said it could take some time for the market to stabilise following the power contract resolution between Tiwai and Meridian. The consent is open for 5 years. Police are still looking for a 30-year-old Invercargill man in relation to an alleged serious assault at the weekend. Warrants to arrest for wounding a person with intent to wound and failing to appear in court on an unrelated matter have been issued for Dale Jason Shalito. The alleged assault occurred at an Invercargill address in the early hours of Sunday morning when Mr Shalito allegedly assaulted a female flatmate. Part of the woman's ear was bitten off and she required medical treatment. Mr Shalito is described as European, 182 centimetres tall, of medium to solid build with short dark hair. Police say he could be anywhere in the South Island and may now have access to a vehicle. He's not believed to be a danger to the public, but police say if anyone sees him, do not approach and immediately call police instead. Limits to lending for home buyers will soon come into effect, with the Reserve Bank announcing that from October 1st, banks will be subject to restrictions on high loan-to-value ratio housing mortgage loans. Financial advisor Stephen O'Connor says the primary focus of the policy is around economic stability and the potential of the housing market to affect it.
It's about the banks being restricted in the lending that they can do over the 80% value of the property. So they're only allowed now, for example, if they are lending $100 million a month, they will be restricted to $10 million of that lending to be to borrowers who don't have 20% deposit. And how will it impact? It will impact on obviously buyers' ability to borrow money for a house. So if you don't have a 20% deposit, the chances are that you won't be able to access a loan. There is still the possibility you will, because they still have some flexibility in their lending, but the majority of people will be required to have a 20% deposit. And that will obviously reduce the demand for housing, and it will impact on people's ability to purchase.
Now, in the United States, they obviously had some problems with their economy relating back to their housing market and borrowing there. Would we have been heading in that same direction, do you think?
Oh, we're a long way from that, Sarah, but there is the potential, if the Reserve Bank let this thing carry on, that we could get to that place. But we are a long way from that, but that's exactly what they're trying to avoid.
Now, for this new policy that's coming into effect, what's it actually going to mean for the housing market in terms of subduing demand?
Well, it certainly will subdue demand, and so there is the high likelihood that housing prices will stop rising anyway. They may not fall because there is still a imbalance between the supply and demand. And the housing affordability issue can only ever be addressed by increasing the supply. So that has to be addressed as well. But the primary focus of this policy is about the economic stability of the country and making sure that a housing bubble doesn't impact or doesn't have the potential to create instability in the banking system.
How much of an impact do you think it'll have here in Southland?
Again, it'll impact the first home buyers that are looking to purchase houses. They will more than likely be required to have a 20% deposit. But having said that, of course, the average house price in Southland is a lot cheaper than it is in Auckland, and so therefore 20%, this 20% deposit requirement is again substantially less than it would be if you were trying to buy a house in Auckland.
The ILT Group saw a small dip in profit in the 2013 financial year, according to its annual report. The ILT Group recorded a consolidated group profit of $10.9 million in the 2013 year, down just over 1% on 2012. The Invercargill Licensing Trust's after-tax profit of $6.1 million was up 1.8% on last year, while the ILT Foundation's surplus of $4.64 million was down just under 11% on 2012. The result was described as a solid profit performance despite still operating in a challenging economic environment. Stay with us after the break, why the future looks bright for New Zealand's tourism industry. Welcome back. Long-term outlook in the tourism sector is positive, according to a new report from the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. The New Zealand Tourism Sector Outlook report shows growth in spending is forecast to come from places such as Australia, Africa, China and emerging markets. The forecast shows visitor numbers and spending are expected to grow between 2013 and 19. It suggests while traditional markets will continue to decline, this should be offset by other markets. New figures released by Statistics New Zealand today show the number of visits to New Zealand was the highest for a July month in 2013 and were up 6% on last year. Tobacco licensing is being touted as a way to restrict the sale of tobacco by researchers at Otago University. A study conducted by the Cancer Society Social and Behavioural Research Unit at Otago University indicates widespread tobacco availability makes it harder for people to quit smoking and easier for new smokers to take up the habit. Research shows nearly half of the country's secondary schools have tobacco retailers within 500 metres, and the density of tobacco outlets is greater in low socio-economic areas. The unit is currently researching options for retail registration or licensing and will include feedback from retailers, policymakers, smoke-free advocates and smokers. The Government Communications Security Bureau and related legislation amendment bill was set to have its third reading in Parliament this afternoon. The amendment, if passed, will allow for the Bureau to legally carry out surveillance on New Zealand citizens. I hit the streets to ask of Southlanders for their thoughts on the proposed legislation.
I don't think it's very good. You know, it's like sort of Big Brother scenario, isn't it? People watching you. It's not very nice.
People who deserve it, I think. Yeah, there's some pretty, crooked people. So, they deserve to be caught if they are doing things that are illegal. But other than that, no.
Do you think it's going to be a good thing for the country?
Probably not.
Because they've already got too much power over people already, so it's just another thing of the government putting people down, isn't it?
What about for the safety of the country?
It's pretty safe at the moment. I think they're doing a pretty good job, aren't they? Catching drugs at the border and all that sort of thing. So they don't really need it.
How do you feel about government being able to have a look at everything that you do online or spy on you?
They already do they? I'm not sure. But they should know what they're doing, shouldn't they?
I personally think that, the government does have a right to make sure that its citizens are following its laws, and I think it's great that they can keep us safe. If people aren't keeping them, then they need to be held accountable.
Can you see any negatives to the scenario?
I suppose everything has to be kept in check, and that's why there are complaints procedures that anyone can follow through with any department with the government.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like the idea of me sitting at home and all of a sudden, oh look, I've got a satellite looking over me. But I don't agree on it, really.
Main concerns, if they have personal information about people, I guess the first thing that springs to mind is blackmail. I don't know, it seems a bit silly, but yeah, stuff like that, personal information that people expect to be private that pass between one another could be exploited. Yeah.
Do you think it's important that we have it as a safety precaution and within the country to have that?
Yeah, there are absolute benefits to it. There's high crime rings that it can help stop, child pornography, things like that. There's definite benefits for it, but as I said, they're not talking about it, so.
Bad thing, I suppose. Yeah, because your privacy's, at stake.
What about the safety of the country?
The safety of the country, I don't really think that the country's at that much risk from terrorist attacks and things like that. But you never know, I suppose. But
so you don't have any concern about government being able to spy on anything that you do within New Zealand?
Not myself personally, no. I haven't got anything to hide, so if they wanted, my life's pretty boring, so if they want to dig into that, they can go ahead.
New Zealand has one of the highest rates of asthma in the world, and the findings of new research show even small changes in indoor temperatures can affect children's lungs. The Housing and Health Research Program at Otago University looked at more than 1 million temperature measurements in 405 homes. The study showed changes to bedroom temperatures were more important than living room temperatures, and children exposed to temperatures below 12 degrees had decreased lung function 2 weeks after the exposure. The study backs up anecdotal evidence, according to paediatrician Dr. Viliso Tutu, who says for the many children with asthma or post-bronchiolitis wheeze, the findings are important.
From the hospital setting, there have been quite a number of instances where families who are regular visitors describe a change of housing situation, going into a warm, dry house where there's not the dampness and the mildew, etc. And the change in the health and the well-being of their child is phenomenal.
Do you encourage parents of children that have sort of lung conditions to heat the room, like to try and bring up that ambient temperature at night?
Yes, yeah. But probably not as often as we should. It would only really be with the problematic kids that we would, even think of that probably. With the children who and there'd be a ton of them who fly under the radar. There could probably be an impact of warming their rooms, but if no one's communicating those messages, then it's not going to happen. But it is only really with the more severe end of the spectrum that we tend to raise that as an issue.
And that's it from news. Coming up in sport, a wrap-up of the weekend's first Bledisloe Cup match and a look forward to this weekend's clash in Wellington. From the news team, good night.